I got one out.
What?
But I didn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
As I see people and put faces to names I know I've read. Cool.
Oh my God.
We're rolling, so just be natural.
Just be now.
Happy
It's like,
natural.
it's like, yeah.
Another week, another, I'll be natural.
Yeah. Put that down, you don't need it there, your microphone doesn't need my 10, yeah, there you go. Nice. Oh, it's hard to do when there are people on that much with my Google.
Oh, sorry, right. Right, I'll behave.
Okay, so then present like a teaching, please.
And the colors are moving and the lines are changing. Oh. But not talking. Got it.
We need constant information in that. Learning.
I should have held it hard.
Yeah.
If I do this, is it right behind his head?
No, you gotta go split this way. Okay.
3, 2, 1. The age of internet and constant information, learning about the world around us, there's more important there. Well, in the past few years, lecture halls like this aren't the only lecture. And
It's the weather.
What is common message the past quarter century.
Dude, one and done. Thank you all for your support. Well, then that doesn't agree.
Hey, thanks.
I just want to cover.
You're not staying?
No, I'm my focus. Thank you guys. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's wonderful.
Both.
I'm
Or do you get video?
maybe video rooms. Yes.
Oh, that's right. Do you, want me to break this down?
Just yes.
Dennis, you can come grab this.
Yes.
Ah.
And thank you for letting us interrupt your,
Oh, you're welcome. Anything I can do for the greater good.
Oh, do you guys know what time you're getting together on Wednesday to do a show?
Still having that.
I need to know the weeks. I'll send that email out, send you guys an email who the duties are. Ben, what time is it?
10:06.
Okay.
10:05. I can read.
Thank you. No, I would have. I was thinking like last week was like chaos for me, but I didn't get the presentation from like. I guess you won't be presentation until Saturday. Well, sort of. One thing I have to do is like I get to finish either diet and that's it.
Yeah, I have that stuff. That's why I did work.
But yeah, no, I was so busy with half of this much project. It was. I don't want to understand that kind of projects. That's okay. They have 2 months, so yeah. You have an idea about how many you have?
3 exams.
I had 3 of them. I had 3 projects last week. It was crazy. And like that, you know, top one didn't take like this. Top one wasn't insane. You just gotta, I don't know, when you know what you're doing, it's not too bad. It's just sometimes I think it takes longer than you want.
Yeah, and then you So, yeah, it'll take you 30 minutes to do, but 2 hours.
Yeah, like,
Oh.
and like, it's like you do like, it's like good too, because you can like bounce it out between your groups, like. Whatever you throw, like I did a lot of, like, a lot of stuff I present in the middle stuff I already throw.
Right.
So like Dennis wrote the overall goal, and Dennis wrote like some of the ending stuff, I did a lot of the middle stuff, I did like the actual storm, the predictability, with our methods, and, like, we kind of like did it based on like what slide we kind of did. So they kind of ended up being half and half, which ended up being really nice.
Makes
Ended up being really nice, and I'm like, oh. Yeah. I guess you guys did that, because you guys did that, but it's that we, sorry, I think I so excited, that's so cool to see all the different presentation.
I'm excited to show off.
You know, I'm really excited to show off, I mean, you showed me what you made, and I was like, oh, I'm like, this collection was gonna be good. One big thing, I just wanna make, like, I just wanna like add on stuff, and, like you tell like different things, like you can still like do the. Like if, like obviously not for like grading, if it's necessary fun, you can like kind of like make different like plots still. And use all that data and everything like that, which is pretty
Right,
right.
I just have to like study, right, so that's, curious, clear.
Oh, you did? Jupyter, you did Jupyter notebook? Yeah. Oh, and I ended up using, like, learning how to use that, like Spider, and Spider actually, I like Spider better than Wax.
Even, the way you just someone when you write a one is the immediately see the output.
Oh, yeah, that was like,
So, and then if you mess something up, you just go back to like it's not working, magic.
just go back to that one.
Oh, you get the medium.
No, it's,
I was really liking that.
no, it's so nice, and I feel like too, with like other stuff. Like it could be like. Like, especially with like stuff like we're doing, you kind of like now, it's like you kind of repeat this same chapter, you do it for different things, now, that's like what it seems like, but it's. And now you have like the foundation of what you have, like the foundation, you can use that. And then, based on your foundation, you could like go on to a collection, like, well. If I had like more time and like, and took like less time to like figure out certain parts of the code, I would have done a little bit more of that. Because, you know, like, we had those like 2 weeks, but we were trying to figure out so much within those 2 weeks and everything working and stuff like that. And it took a little bit of time, took a little bit of patience, it took ideas. And then yeah, it was a lot of hard work, but then like once it's done, it's like, yes.
You still did more than you asked.
Yeah, that too.
It actually was a lot of. Then everyone did.
Everyone did above and beyond, yeah, exactly, like everyone went like above and beyond, I feel like people have like a different approach, like. One group did, I guess, it's like all hard, we kind of did like, just looking at the wind, like, all this model. Kind of like get me with the storm,
Yeah.
and then, the other group did, the other Hurricane Idalia group did, they kind of took it from like a, like the tracking approach, and I thought that was pretty cool too. Like, it felt like people went about it in different ways, so like, it made each project like stand out. That was a cool, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, despite sometimes do. In the days of being stressed out making the project, I think it was really it was really good project to do. It was really good blessing, so. And like. You know, I think there's so much inside on it, which is pretty awesome.
And I was saying, I did 100 on the final project. Yeah, I agree. It was, I mean, I didn't, that's when I was like, absolutely not.
Oh, they.
So, yeah. It was really nice.
We so rough for me, it's because I've never seen it, so.
Right.
It's like, wow. It's like, wait, I mean, even though it, I learned something about, I guess in 2 years, so I was like, I'm like,
Report.
so that's a little while first,
Mesh.
and,
Well, like San Hills.
it's like 8 miles from me, like, back here, and you have a station and stuff.
You said that you was like.
And then like it's working on probably kind of like get more like it's close to what you actually do. I think that's pretty cool. And timing of the presentation went better than I thought it would, just really
Awesome. Now, Reeves, I mean, hello. Yeah. Yeah.
Christian, do I have to have this PowerPoint open in the browser, or is it just doing a full screen?
It should be a full screen.
Okay.
share, So I think we're.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes it like is only on one part and I think you do. Let's get started.
All right.
People make sure to learn. Happy to have Ben Reppert here today. This is the final Ken Reeves Memorial Weather Briefing of the year, actually, of the semester. So thanks to the couple of you who are here and who have been coming out to the briefing. And happy to have Ben. One more note, so I know people here, but if anyone hasn't voted in the second runoff, I just sent out for the head of forecasting election, Peter posted on that for 5 o'clock today. I just got like 30 votes in 10 minutes, which is great. But feel free to get yours in. Yeah, Ben, take it away whenever.
All right. Yeah, it's election season in America, aka Walker Building. Yeah, so thanks for having me this morning. Certainly this isn't the most boring period I've done one of these briefings for, but I selfishly wish it was at least a little bit more exciting. I feel like that's been an evergreen statement of most of the briefing hosts over the last few weeks. But since we don't exactly have measurable snow locally in the forecast, I thought that we'd reminisce with a scene from about a year ago just to make myself feel a little bit better. As a past CWS president, somehow 9 years ago, I am still very proud and pleased to see that the tradition continues. And by tradition here, I mean the final forecast video of the semester involving some shenanigans. So just giving this morning's group a shout out. Weston was their holiday gift that they were in the process of unwrapping and revealing this morning. And Christian, I don't know if you were trying to get anyone to see how you close the video, but I at least did. But nevertheless, happy to see that tradition continues with the last video of the semester. Now for some self-deprecating, because I'm often quite good at that. Little backstory on this, just because about 10 years ago, a buddy of mine and I went hiking up on Cadillac Mountain in Maine on the first day of meteorological fall. It fell on Labor Day weekend. And I took a tumble, and so he's made fun of me ever since. So anytime I think of meteorological fall in my brain, I have this vision of him making fun of me as meteorologist fall on the first day of meteorological fall. But nevertheless, thought we take a few minutes here to look back at the season that just ended. Of course, now we are in meteorological winter. On the surface, again, these maps from the back, they might be a little hard to see, but this is September, October, and November. Broad look at it. From precip standpoint, September, sort of this dichotomy of wetter east, drier west. October was almost sort of flipped, but mostly on the dry side. And then November, notably dry for most of Pennsylvania and actually the Northeast as a whole. Temperature wise, September, at least in Pennsylvania, was close to average, generally speaking, of slightly on the warm side. October, quite warm, and November for most was actually on the cool side. For State College specific, September, we were about 0.8 of a degree above average, about an inch below average in precip. October, we were about +3 in temperature and a 0.5 inch below average in precip. And November here, we were about 0.4 of a degree above average in temperature and about an inch below average in precip. When you average or when you add all that together for the autumn, you get an autumn departure temperature wise of about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit, and we were nearly 3 inches below average in precip. That was our driest autumn since 2016, and it was actually in the top 1/3. It was a top 1/3 dry autumn here locally. I believe it was 41st place overall. So I'm just going to go off on a slight tangent here because I know a lot of you are, whether it's in classes or for CWS, just adding context to some recent weather. I know a lot of you are doing that and getting better at it. One of the things I talk about in 481, for those of you that have had to sit through that with me, is the importance of adding context to the weather whenever you can, just to help differentiate yourself from not just your peers, but also the weather apps. Say things and do things that this cannot do. It helps keep you relevant. So if we take a little bit of a closer look at some of these things, again, stepping back real quick, going deeper than just saying, you know, generally dry and say generally mild or generally cool. There's more you can say about this. So if you start to scratch the surface a bit, some notables from September. We actually got to 89 degrees here twice. That was our highest temperature during the month of September since 2019. We had as many days of 85 or higher, 4 of them, than or equal to the past 4 Septembers combined. We also had the most number of days with a high of 60 or lower since 2006. So that sort of speaks to this. You know, September sort of came out around average, but it was thanks to a lot of rather warm days, but also a lot of rather cool days. Also notably, for the 19th time since 2000, we didn't drop into the 30s here. Prior to 2000, it only happened 19 years in total. In October, we had 9 days that got to at least 75. That was the most in a long time, since 1963. Interestingly enough, last October was actually a relatively cool October, and we had no such days. For the 10th October since 2000, we didn't get to freezing here. That only happened 7 times in total in the previous 107 years. And actually, there were only 6 nights here this October that got down into the 30s. That was the 8th least since records began in 1893. And then finally, November, we got down to 18 degrees. That was on the OBS card for both the 29th and the 30th here. That's not exactly rare, but it is in the colder half of the distribution. Those 2 mins that we had in the teens, that was more than the previous 3 Novembers combined, where we only did it once. Last Tuesday, the high temperature, which was on Wednesday's OBS card, but the high temperature only got to 28. 93 Novembers didn't have any of those. There are also only 6 days during the month of November with measurable precip, which is the fewest since 2001. Dennis was in the room here a little bit ago, but I guess he had to leave to go do some other things. I was going to give him a shout out. Just to put a little bit more perspective on last Tuesday's chill, which again went on to Wednesday's OBS card. Christian was doing the briefing last week and advertised this as an unseasonably and arguably unreasonably cold day around here, which certainly verified. Again, we only managed 28 after a low of 18, which put the average temperature for the day at 23 if you combine that high and the low. In the last 10 years, so what I've done here, I've narrowed this down to only November days. This one is looking at the last 10 years, going back to 2014. That was the 6th coldest November day in the last 10 years. And actually, if you go back to 30 years, that is the chart on the right, it was the 10th coldest November day in the last 30 years. So that was a day that had some teeth to it. as we say, quite chilly, so early in the season. And this is especially where I'll give Dennis a shout out because I saw that he shared this factoid the other day. But now this is just looking at since early 2022. I've highlighted the years in yellow from last winter. So meteorological winter 2022 to 23. Here is our last Tuesday, the average daily temperature of 23. Last winter, there were only 6 days that were colder than last Tuesday, which more speaks to the fact that last winter was just so mild. All the other days on this list were actually from winter of 2021 to 2022. But last winter, there were only 6 days that were colder than our day here last Tuesday. And if you take out the Arctic blast from around Christmas in 2022, there were only 2 days in February that were colder than last Tuesday was. So if last Tuesday just felt bone chilling, I think it felt worse than it otherwise would have too, because, you know, going back to all of last winter, we didn't really have that many cold days here. So there's my shout out to Dennis, but he's not in the room. Finally, just to wrap up this little spiel about where we're coming from. So this is snow stats for the autumn or meteorological fall. We still are only at 1/10 of an inch here locally, which there are 96 meteorological falls that had more than that. Historically, though, September, October, November here is not it's not a snowy time. We typically don't see a lot, but I did at least want to point out the fact that 96 other meteorological falls have had at least 2/10 of an inch, if not a little bit more.
Hey, Ben,
Yeah.
before you move on, why don't you tell everybody a reasonable theory for your first couple slides when you talk about September and October. You used the year 2000 as a delimiter for how things seem to be different after the year 2000 in terms of overnight lows in September and October.
Well, so to be transparent on 2000, that was just sort of in my internally as thinking, you know, change of the millennium. It just seemed like a nice round number, which is why I explicitly picked 2000. I didn't actually look at how it would change if I picked, say, 98, 99 or 01, but a couple of things going on there. Looking back over the long-term climate records, not just locally, but also globally, after the one strong El Nino in 98, each time we have one of these strong El Ninos, it seems like we have this sort of step up in global temps that sets a sort of a new benchmark for climate. So I think the late 90s El Nino event might have something to do with the fact that around the late 90s or early 2000s, things may have shifted a bit. But also the fact too that starting in the early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to put you on the spot,
Oh no,
but there's a local thing that I thought you were aware of.
What, the bridge?
Yeah,
Oh,
the construction of the new building.
But
I know that was in the 90s.
that was built in the early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah, but there used to be a parking lot that was even closer than that building was, so. Like when people talk about the building, I'm curious if the parking lot though had just as much impact as the building.
the thing I've wondered about that too,
But I
though.
think the building has changed the wind circulation.
Oh,
On this side,
absolutely.
The building that crosses Abbott has changed the way air circulates on this side of Walker Road.
Oh, there's no question.
Yeah, no
And-
question.
There has to be a link between why we have so many fewer.
Prior to knowing about the parking lot too, I used to think that like that interrupted, like on good radiation nights, maybe some drainage from the golf course coming over this way. I used to think that before I learned it. Well, part of me still wants to. Then I also didn't know about the parking lot until like 2 years ago,
Yeah,
but
because Paul and Brent used to park right out here to get to Level.
Oh, I know.
That's that big.
I know there used to be a parking lot, but I think the construction of that building has changed the ability of air to circulate off the golf courses. Sort of down a little bit.
toward the
into
shelter. Yeah, it's certainly, it's interesting. I've often thought that and wondered it. Do we know how Bill feels about the whole building?
I think he throws the parking lot thing in there too.
Okay. It's certainly interesting, but
Curious now you said that, John, with all the new construction stuff, if that also will, even though it's a little farther away, I don't know.
I think I can pull this up pretty quick. So the reason, just to John's point here, since we're down the rabbit hole, the reason that I sort of latched onto that idea was from a few summers ago when we had here locally an incredible number of nights that did not drop below 70 degrees. And this is not related to today's weather at all, but in the early 2000s here locally, there were an incredible number of nights that started to be 70 or higher here in State College, which happened to coincide with around the time that the IST bridge, or now the Westgate building, was constructed. So the number of 70-degree nights in State College, that's sort of what first latched me onto this possible connection. But again, there's flavors of that relationship in other things too. Climatology for early December. Today, the average high here is 42, average low 29. Your sun times, thank you, hello. Sun time 7:20 is sunrise, sunset is 4:43. Interestingly enough, the sunset doesn't get any earlier than it does today. Stays the same for a little bit and then starts gradually getting later again. Sunrise is not done getting later, however. For any of you snow enthusiasts, your record daily snowfall for today is 4.5 inches back from 1957. At the end of next week, end of finals week, I'm guessing quite a few of you might be gone by then, but for anyone still around, by that point, our average high is 38, average low 26. Sun comes up then at 7:29, sunset gets a minute later though, 4:44. And the record daily snowfall from December 15th is 6 inches from 2013. If you ask climatology, or if you ask State College, when do you typically see thunderstorms, or when do you most typically see thunderstorms? The answer would be in the afternoon and evening hours in the summer. Not exactly in the afternoon and evening hours of December 3rd, but we did verify a thunderstorm here last evening. If you look, so on this chart here, January 1st is on the left, December 31st is on the right, midnight's at the bottom, and then basically it's, going later and later and later in the day toward the top. So typically, State College's highest frequency of thunderstorms is centered in the afternoon and evening hours in the summer, and early December, kind of straddling this line over here, not many reports of thunder, not just in the afternoon or evening, but in early December. It's not a time that we would typically expect to see a thunderstorm, but we had one yesterday. It also came with some pockets of hail in town. I know I had hail at my house. I know Marissa had hail. I think we observed it on campus too. I saw some of the students posting some videos of some pea-sized hail falling, although I don't know where everyone lives or was. But some of these pixels of the deepest reds, especially again around town and a little bit to the south and to the west of town, there were some pockets of hail mixed in. I don't know that the KUNV ASOS or AWOS has the ability to report hail even if it wanted to. It didn't. I honestly don't know if it has the ability, but I also don't think that there were any, I don't know that any hail fell on the northeast side of town anyway in the direction of the airport. Weather World viewer shared this one with me from South Central Pennsylvania. This is in Cumberland County, some pea-sized hail with a cell down there. This is a lightning flash induced lit up shot from Marissa. Where
Permission to use that?
I did not. Hey, in retrospect, can I share your hail photo in my briefing?
Is that Marissa's hot tub?
No, it's such a downer, it's my table, but the chairs all, and the benches all.
Oh.
No, my nieces and nephew came for Thanksgiving, and they were very sad.
So thanks to some of the lightning flashes, this actually briefly lit up this still shot where I mean, arguably that's hail that was trying to be accumulating hail, and if not is accumulating hail.
There's still piles of hail in my yard this morning.
Oh, really? I did not have quite. From Coco Roz, the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. Few actual hail reports from some of the observers across Pennsylvania, 2 from Washington County, 1 from Allegheny, and 1 from Center County. But again, there were more hail reports than what Coco Roz observers reported from yesterday. In any case, certainly a bit of a rare early December day here in Pennsylvania. And if Carl Schneider happens to be listening to this, want to give kudos to him for Friday afternoon entertaining the idea of thunderstorms for yesterday in Pennsylvania. So as far as our current weather, this is more like it for central Pennsylvania in early December. I was saying to Marissa last week, I was starting to think that we all ended up moving somewhere else and didn't know it, because recently there's been quite a few days that have been oddly bright around here for this time of the year, but now we've sort of gone back into a more typical regime for these parts. Right now, statewide, generally speaking, we're from the upper 30s to the upper 40s. Philadelphia is at 51 this hour. Quite a bit of cloudiness in central and northwestern Pennsylvania, and then out in the direction of the Great Lakes. Of course, we've got a wind flow that is largely coming over those lakes, so it's relatively cloudy in the northwestern half of the state. Some breaks in southeastern Pennsylvania. Can see that much more clearly here looking at the visible satellite image. A lot of neat features to glance at right now. Here locally, you can see a lot of the low and mid-level clouds that are courtesy of a wind flow that is largely coming from over the Great Lakes. These higher level clouds, though, are moving from southwest to northeast. These are some cirrus clouds or alto cirrus that are more like mid to high up in the atmosphere. And the fact that they're moving from southwest to northeast tells us that at least somewhere in the atmosphere, we are still in some sort of southwesterly flow. We also have a decaying disturbance that is diving to our south. This is going to continue to move well south of Pennsylvania and continue to decay. So while this looks like a nice swirly on the satellite imagery here this morning, this is not going to affect our weather in any kind of appreciable way around here. The other thing on the visible satellite that was fun to watch a few hours ago as the sun was just rising, the western edge of this deck of clouds here out over the ocean was casting a nice shadow on its northwestern side. That's also fun to look at. There's also still some snow ongoing up across northern New England underneath this thick shield of clouds. Here's the radar showing accumulating snow still going on for most of northern New England. It's actually been a fairly decent start to the ski season across northern New England. They've gotten a few of these storms that have come through to run into enough cold air to actually yield, especially for northern Vermont and northern New Hampshire, a pretty good start to the ski season. Around here, we still have a couple of light showers that are drifting on through. On my walk-in this morning, I got hit with a few raindrops, but theme of the rest of the day, there could still be a couple of these drips and drops here and there, maybe even a wet snowflake or two across northwestern Pennsylvania. But as we go throughout the day, precipitation risks should be decreasing. Clouds, though, will generally be hard to get rid of. Here's some precipitation associated with that disturbance going by to our south and to our west. This will continue to largely decay as it moves off to the east. But again, at least fun to look at on radar and satellite. All right, where do I want to go first? The next interesting thing, and interesting is a loose term here. Whoops. All right. So if we fast forward to, well, let's just look at sort of where we are right now. So what I have plotted here, the colors, these are surface temps. The black lines here, these are 500 millibar height lines. So this kink in the 500 millibar height lines right here is that disturbance that I just showed you on satellite and radar passing by to the south. If we go forward in time, very quickly by tomorrow morning, the next wave is diving from southern Canada down into the Midwest and the Great Lakes, essentially an Alberta clipper that'll be coming down, which lately it feels like we haven't really seen many clippers really at all coming toward the eastern United States. This earlier, or I should say last week, this looked a little bit more interesting, like it could actually survive its trip toward the coast and maybe provide all of us with a period of some rain or snow. But unfortunately, it's going to get robbed of its chance to do that. So who all in here has taken, by a show of hands, who all in here has taken 411? A couple of you. Well, in any case, quick crash course. I guess you get some of this in 201 too. Cyclone model basics. When you get an upper level disturbance to sort of roll over a notable surface temperature difference, that's sort of a recipe for cyclogenesis. Off the East Coast by tomorrow, that's where this front that's been moving through here sort of goes and dies. But it leaves a pretty good temperature contrast sort of near the Outer Banks. You go from, surface temperatures in the 70s to around 80 and then quickly back to say the 40s. So around here, we basically have what's left of a front, stationary front. An upper level disturbance is going to ride over that. So as this next clipper starts getting close to us tomorrow, there's going to be a new area of low pressure that forms way too far to the south to do anything useful for us. And so that's actually going to become the main feature as it sort of rolls out to sea and intensifies. So as the first system actually moves toward us, there will be some light snow that starts to break out in Pennsylvania later tomorrow and into tomorrow night. And then very quickly, it's going to fall apart as this system takes over for it or from it off of the eastern seaboard. And then we're just left with some cold, breezy conditions in its wake. Here's a better look at sort of this setup at work. So this is tomorrow morning. Here's that weak area of low pressure, the clipper diving from southern Canada into the Central Plains. By this point around here, dew points are plotted on this map. This is tomorrow afternoon with northwesterly flow, and we're sort of caught in between systems. There's also going to be quite a bit of dry air in place. Dew points, upper teens, low 20s around here. So even as this clipper moisture moves in tomorrow, it's going to be fighting dry air at the onset. So not only is the system moisture starved to begin with, but it's running into an even drier air mass. And this is now tomorrow afternoon, early tomorrow afternoon. Here's the clipper low, and you can already see one closed isobar starting out here off of the Outer Banks. That's the beginning of the coastal low that's basically going to end this clipper's chance at doing anything truly notable in Pennsylvania. And then you can sort of see that handoff taking place so that by late tomorrow evening into early Wednesday, coastal low is now taking over, but it's developing, basically just east of Kitty Hawk. Too far south to do much for us. Notice we're still largely in dry air with high pressure to the north, not giving this coastal low much opportunity to come farther north. There it goes out to sea. And then in the wake of that, we're generally left with some chilly breezes from the northwest. High pressure will be sitting over the Tennessee Valley as that coastal low moves out to sea. So that'll create somewhat of a pressure gradient around here later Wednesday into Thursday. Again, some chilly winds by that point. Wednesday is probably our coldest day of the week. From the GEFS, so this is all the members of the GFS ensemble averaged together. Just looking at its opinion of 24-hour precip from tomorrow morning through Wednesday morning to basically encapsulate the clipper moisture or lack thereof. Here locally, we are highlighted in that first color contour, which is 1/100th of an inch to 5/100ths of an inch. Much of southwestern Pennsylvania, it's suggesting more like 500ths to 1500ths, with the maximum sitting over the southern Laurel Highlands down near, say, Laurel Summit. Here locally, I think this is too ambitious. Dry air in place, moisture starved system that is basically losing much of a chance that it has anyway because this coastal low is going to take over. Later tomorrow afternoon here, can it flurry or could there be a snow shower or two? I suppose. I'm honestly leaning toward the fact that there won't be anything here locally. You get into southwestern PA, you know, if the atmosphere moistens up enough and you squeeze out 500ths to a tenth of an inch of liquid, you can get a quick fluffy inch and a half of snow tomorrow evening into tomorrow night in southwestern Pennsylvania and especially the Laurel Highlands. But again, here locally, I'm not too enthused, and especially east of here, not too terribly enthused with that. Let's see. As we go into, we can just stay here. As we go into the middle of the week behind the clipper, Wednesday, again, I think it's our coldest day of the week, big trough here in the eastern United States, flow coming mainly from the north. So that's a chilly day. Again, it'll be breezy. It's not going to be as cold as it was early to mid last week. The air mass is not quite as cold this time around. It's another one of these transient cold shots, though. We've already got this big upper level ridge that is building over the plains. And as we get into later this week, there'll be a pretty notable disturbance that rolls into the west. It'll help to carve out a trough in the west, which will make this ridge amplify in the eastern United States. So that by the time we get to the end of this week, we're back in southwesterly flow, heights around here quite a bit above average. It's not necessarily going to be an overly bright time, but even without a ton of sun later this week, temperatures will quickly rise back through the 40s and potentially even into the 50s for some by especially Friday and into the weekend. The next system of note probably holds off until later next weekend. The next big trough will be carving out through the Central Plains by Friday into Saturday. Gulf of Mexico will be open for business. So this will probably kick off some beneficial rain in a part of the country that has been quite dry, but also the threat for some severe weather this weekend through the southern plains and then over into the interior southeast. Depending on how this trough, how the tilt of it is, the speed of it, and other things going on, that'll determine exactly when our next real good rainmaker gets here, and also if there's the opportunity for any more December thunder up in these parts, say next Sunday. But in any case, the GFS, its opinion of this, it starts to make this trough go sort of neutral tilt pretty early, which will probably send a surface low well to our west. Again, sometime later next weekend or even next Monday. If this really is a high amplitude pattern like this, that could tend to slow things down a little bit. So next Sunday, Monday, that's probably when we'll have a fairly notable surface low going near us or to our west. In any case, that puts us on the warm side of yet another storm. Deep southwesterly flow, highly amplified storm to the west. That's a recipe for around here. No kind of big snowstorm, unfortunately, for any snow lovers. With a storm this powerful, though, and enough cold air on its cold side, this will probably be the first notable storm of the season that has some severe weather component on its warm side and also a fairly wintry component on its cold side. We just won't be on the cold side of this system. And then I'm not going to go too far beyond because uncertainty abounds. Second opinion of the same storm. This is the European model. again, by Thursday afternoon, here's the beginning of that trough digging into the Rockies. Still in northwesterly flow here, but ridging is trying to move on in. By Friday afternoon, ridge in the eastern United States, storm digging into the Rockies and the Central Plains. And then the European is especially excited about this system. It's already taking on a negative tilt in the European model by late Saturday night. Quite strong vortmax associated with it. Again, this would also promote some beneficial rain, but also the risk for some severe weather in the southern plains and into the interior southeast. Same idea though, around here, deep southwesterly flow. By this point, temperatures will probably be topping out in the 40s, if not the 50s this weekend. So very, very limited opportunity for any frozen precipitation around here. And then per the European model, again, very strong upper level disturbance powering a surface low in the 980s in this run parked near Chicago. Plenty of rain on its warm side, and this would also promote a pretty good swath of snow on its cold side. So we have time to figure the details out, but at this point, I would say that this is probably a system that has a very rainy and stormy component on its warm side and a wintry component on its cold side. Now we just have to figure out exactly where those things set up. European model is a little bit slower with this though. In its latest full run though, it does bring a pretty good soaking through here later Sunday and into early Monday. Again, depending on the details and how warm it could get around here next weekend and how things track and shake out, on the warm side of this system, there will be dynamics and thermodynamics in place that can produce thunderstorms, probably severe weather down south, but depending on how much of this cape is able to get drawn north, could we introduce the thought of some thunderstorms around here again next Sunday? I wouldn't rule it out, especially if over time things trend in a warmer direction around here, or ahead of time, if some sunny breaks can pop out. You know, with a strong system rolling east and we're on the warm side of it, I would not be surprised if next Sunday thunderstorms get pretty close to us here again. So that would be interesting, twice in 1 month. The last thing I wanted to mention before wrapping up is just some longer range stuff. Ultimately, at least through the first half of December, this does not look to be a great pattern for winter lovers, which I am one, so it does make me a little bit sad. Overall, for a while, it seems like we're going to be in this pattern of storm goes through, we might turn chilly for a day or two, a transient cold shot. Then we warm up again, keep the active pattern going, but warming up ahead of a storm, that's generally a recipe for some rain. This product, this is the MJO. This tracks convection and activity of waves on both sides of the equator, generally speaking, between Africa and the maritime continent and over toward the West Pacific. Generally speaking, the phases that the MJO is in right now, phases 4, 5, 6, and even 7, in the eastern United States, this tends to teleconnect to, generally speaking, warmer than average patterns. There are some suggestions that out toward the end of the month, the MJO could be headed more toward phase 8 and phase 1, which is more of a beneficial regime for cold in the east and also some stormier weather in the east. If we look at temperature composites for the MJO, so this basically looks at over the period of record, you know, when the MJO is in a certain phase at a certain time of the year, what does it tend to portend in terms of temperature? So yellow and orange is above average. Blue, of course, is below average. I'm centered on November, December, January to reflect the current time of the year. Generally speaking, more often than not, warm phases are 3, 4, 5, 6, which is where the MJO is traveling right now and will be for about the next week to 10 days. If the guidance, which is suggesting that later in December, weeks 3 and 4 of December, the MJO starts heading for phases 7, 8, 1. 7, 8, 1 this time of the year tends to portend colder risks into the east. From a precipitation standpoint, oops, where? Well, that's interesting. They used to have a precip. There we go. So if we center on the same time period, precipitation is always a little tougher, but generally speaking, phases 7, 8, and 1 also tend to portend dry more often than not. So as far as getting things to line up for the threat for, say, appreciable snow around here, to at least have the opportunity to get colder risks into the east, and maybe time it up with some storminess, I'd feel better about later this month than I certainly would for the next 2 weeks. It's not to say we can't try to time up a cold shot with a disturbance or a storm. But for the next 2 weeks, I'm really not holding my breath for much wintry around here. I'd feel better about it if it were in the second half of December. The other thing I've been keeping an eye on too, even when we get into, say, northwesterly flow behind these storms, I'll just go back to for example, the next couple of days, Wednesday, Thursday of this week. It'll be chilly. Northerly flow aloft, helping to bring down some cooler air. But you know, if we trace the lines back, our air mass essentially mid to late week will be coming from central Canada. At the moment, if we look at how snow depth is tracking, there's a dearth of snowpack in central and west central Canada and the northern plains. So even if we bring our air from a cold place, which it is, air masses this time of the year, if they're coming from areas that are largely free of snow, it helps to limit truly how much teeth that cold air can have. So right now, Canada, especially central Canada and the northern plains, they're not loaded up with snow, which at this time of the year, these red pixels here tells us that that's below average. The fact that there's no snow on the ground in those places right now, it's at a time of the year where there typically should be, or we would typically expect to find it there. So any air masses coming our way from the northwest at the moment, until we can load Canada and the northern plains up with snow, will be moderated. And going back to the 500 millibar height pattern, there's also still a lot of Pacific air mixed into this. If you trace the flow back upstream, yes, our flow by, say, this is still Wednesday. It's northwesterly flow around here, but it's coming from a place that doesn't have much snow on the ground, so that'll help moderate the air mass. But then if you keep tracing the lines back, there's a lot of this Pacific air that is also involved in this pattern. So again, for the next couple of weeks, until we can start loading up Canada with snow or interrupt the flow of all this Pacific air, even when you start to see this troughiness in the eastern US on the models, while it might yield a couple of chilly days, there's a limit, I think, to just how cold the chilly days can be. It might be seasonable to slightly below average instead of, say, what we had last Tuesday. I think I pulled up a map from last Tuesday too. Yeah, here it is. Here's an example. This is sort of the weather from last Tuesday evening. Around here, the flow was northwesterly, but notice how this ridge along the west coast was really prominent. And so our weather last week was actually more coming from the Arctic. That was almost more of a attempt at a cross-polar flow look, which helped to make middle of last week quite cold. Pattern going forward, lot of Pacific air involved in this. We're not getting that flow cross-polar really from the Arctic. We're getting Pacific air that is then going over a place that is absent of snow and then coming down into us. And again, early indications are if you want the overall pattern to become something more favorable for cold and potentially snow, we're looking at toward the end of December, closer to the end of the month, in theory, right now. Anybody want to talk about anything else? Have questions on something I didn't show? Have questions on something I did show?
I've noticed with the past like year or two, there's a lot of us like looking out like 2-3 weeks saying, oh, the pattern looks like better at this point. And then as you get closer, you're kind of
Still waiting.
on it. Is that more just like a winter lover's like dream to be optimistic, or is there an actual like dynamic?
So lately, yeah, some of us internally here, we've always had this joke recently that the pattern change is always 10 days away. Pattern change is always 10 days away. I think in the eastern United States in the last few years, largely there's been a snow drought. I don't think that helps anything. I think it's probably in the DNA that if for winter lovers, you're always looking for something to convince yourself like, oh, that's what's going to change things to something more favorable. I tend to agree with you that recently it seems like there's always these indications of that's a much better look. And then until we get to it in 2 weeks after that, we're saying, oh, that's a much better look. And then if you say that enough times, it's spring and nothing happened. So I agree with you. I feel like that's been a common thing. I just think, you want the background state of the atmosphere to at least tip the scale towards something more favorable. And so at least at the moment with MJO in unfavorable phases, a PNA that is negative, which favors West Coast troughing, that combination in itself right now is unfavorable for much good, unless you thread the needle with some timely combination. But later this month, again, if you at least start to introduce some more favorable background states, I at least get more optimistic. So an MJO going toward better phases, inkling by then that the PNA is not negative, but instead tries to go positive. Again, in 2 weeks, we could probably look at it again and say, oh, in 2 weeks, the PNA will be favorable. But at least for the first half of December, the background pattern, I don't think is favorable for much. Indications are right now by the end of the month, things rearrange toward more favorable directions.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right. Well, thank you to the 5 of you for coming. You're welcome. Can I just end this?
Yeah, you can just go into the Zoom. Shut up.
But overall, the weather pattern, I love that.
Hey, Christian, I was rude and just helped myself with some of this.
Oh, you're all good.